Joining us now is Congressman Joe Neguse. Congressman Neguse represents Colorado's 2nd Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. He previously was elected in 2008 as a CU regent and was in that position from 2008 to 2015. He then was appointed executive director of the Department of Regulatory Agencies in 2015 and served for 2 years. He was elected to his first term to the House of Representatives in November of 2018, becoming the first African-American member of Congress in Colorado history. He serves as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, House Natural Resources Committee, and the House Select Committee on the climate crisis. Please welcome Representative Joe Neguse, and Congressman, congratulations on your reelection.
Well, thank you, Steve, for the very kind words. Appreciate it. And thank you for hosting me this morning, and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all about the road ahead and what we hope to accomplish in the 117th Congress. As was mentioned, I represent the 2nd District, which of course includes all of Larimer County, as well as our Central Mountain communities, most of Boulder County and Broomfield as well. And suffice to say, there will be no shortage of challenges that we'll need to address as a Congress and as a country in the months and years ahead. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that with our reelection last week and to continue to serve the people of Northern Colorado in the United States Congress. Just to kind of give you a sense of what I think is to come in the next year, obviously we're all well aware of the electoral outcomes, and I do think that what's most likely, the most likely scenario is a Republican Senate with a Democratic president in President-elect Joe Biden, and a Democratic House. Obviously, there are still a number of House races that remain uncalled. The Democratic majority lost several seats this cycle. And of course, in the Senate, we have 2 outstanding runoff races in the state of Georgia, which will take place in another 8 weeks, notwithstanding I know that none of us wish to have yet another election after going through a brutal election season this year. But in any event, I think conventional wisdom, at least as far as I can tell, and as the current, irrespective of what may happen in the next few weeks, right now we have a Republican Senate, Democratic President, Democratic House. And I think, in my view, we're going to have to work incredibly hard to try to build consensus and try to establish agreement with divided government in Washington, D.C. around a shared sense of American values and priorities that I do think resonate with most people in our country, certainly most people in our state. When I think about what that agenda would look like in the coming Congress, in some respects, it I think comports really well with your legislative priorities as I've reviewed them, and as we've had a chance to discuss those priorities in the past. That includes transportation and infrastructure funding. I had an opportunity to catch the tail end of the prior panel with several people whom I've had the privilege of working with, Greg Fulton, when I was running DORA, which includes, of course, the Public Utilities Commission, and of course, Shoshana Liu, who's a dear friend, and I've worked closely with her as the executive director of CDOT. I think that infrastructure funding happens to be one of these areas that, generally speaking, folks on both the right and the left would like to see the Congress accomplish. And yet, for a variety of different reasons, we've been unable to do that in the last Congress. I'm hopeful that in the next Congress, President-elect Biden has talked about his Build Back Better plan, and I think that plan largely encompasses much of what the House has already pursued in the 116th Congress, the Moving America Forward Act, which included a significant investment in rebuilding crumbling infrastructure around the country, roads, bridges, highways. I think the funding in that bill would certainly have inured to the benefit of the people of Northern Colorado as we think about widening the lanes on I-25. And while I am grateful for all of the work that our local governments have done and local communities have done in Weld County and in Larimer County, working in tandem with state officials and our county commissioners, the truth of the matter is that federal investment has to be brought to bear. Now, local governments should not have to be shouldering this alone, nor should local taxpayers. So I'm hopeful that infrastructure will be at the very top of our agenda, and that is something that we could hopefully accomplish within the first 100 days of the 117th Congress. It's certainly going to be a top priority of mine, and I will be articulating the same to Democratic leadership in the House. In addition, of course, the perhaps more pressing short-term need that I know you all are well familiar with is the need to get a handle on the coronavirus pandemic, and both in terms of the public health risks that it has created, and of course here in Colorado, we're no exception to that rule. We've seen the contagion spreading over the course of the last several weeks in particular to incredibly high rates that are almost as high as when the virus was at its peak earlier this year in April and March during the shutdowns, as we all recall. And then the economic fallout. And I visited with countless businesses in Fort Collins, in Loveland, in Windsor, in Estes Park, that are struggling, and absent additional federal relief will not survive the winter. So we, of course, we got very close, as you all know, to a relief package ultimately being finalized between the House and the Senate and the President, somewhere between the $1.8 trillion and $2 trillion numbers that the House and Senate had been had been discussing and debating. I think that there is a strong desire, as I visit with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, for us to get a coronavirus stimulus relief bill done, akin to what we did during the earlier months in this year regarding, for example, the CARES Act and its progeny, the Payroll Protection Program. As David knows, it has had its limits, and there have been a lot of hurdles and obstacles. But nonetheless, it also helped provide a lifeline to a lot of small businesses in our community. And I've heard from a lot of folks who own, mom and pop restaurants and retailers and elsewhere, who've told me personally that absent the PPP, their businesses would not have survived. So that program was conceived in a bipartisan manner. It was something that ultimately received the votes of virtually every member of Congress. I think every member of Colorado's delegation, with the exception of one. And so my hope is that we can build on that and get a relief bill done. If not in the lame duck session, we have roughly 7 weeks to go in the lame duck session of Congress. I'll be back in Washington in a few short days. And my hope is that we could get it done then. But if not, certainly in the early days of the Biden presidency, the Biden administration, I suspect that we're going to be able to get that done. And happy to talk in more detail at the granular level about what that bill could include. For example, one of my priorities is Eidl Forgiveness because of the way in which the PPP program and the Eidl program were structured. Obviously, the Eidl program is an pre-existing program, but nonetheless, there are a lot of businesses who are now faced with the prospect of having to pay back $10,000 that they were led to believe was not going to be the case. And so working with our local banking community and small businesses, we had introduced a bipartisan bill called the Eidl Emergency Loan Forgiveness Act, which would essentially wipe away those loans. And we think that again, is a kind of an example of an idea that would be bipartisan nature, that could pass the Congress, and that we think would inure to the benefit of our community here to ensure that the economic recovery extends to all parts of our state and not just the Denver metro area. Finally, I'll just say that there's a lot of opportunity, I think, again, as we think about what this next Congress will accomplish, as I sort of talk about it, go back to the basics, whether it's water development and water infrastructure. We have the Platte River Recovery Implementation Plan, the reauthorization plan, bill that I authored with Lynn Cheney in Wyoming that passed the Congress and was signed by President Trump earlier this year. Bills like that, which I think could ultimately make their way through the Natural Resources Committee, on which I serve. As you all know, the 2nd District is 52% public lands. And so, of course, serving on that committee is incredibly important for me and for our community. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to get something done in that regard in terms of water development and infrastructure. Wildfire mitigation and prevention. Of course, our community has just been so viscerally impacted. I've spent quite a bit of time visiting with the first responders and firefighters and the many folks who have been protecting our community for the better part of the last several months. As you all know, 2 of the 3 largest wildfires in state history occurred in the last 75 days, both of which happened here in the 2nd Congressional District in Grand County, the East Troublesome Fire and the Cameron Peak Fire, of course, in Larimer County. Thankfully, because of the heroism of our first responders and firefighters, and of course, the good weather that we've been able to get, including some snow that's still falling here down in Lafayette, we've been able to get on the other side of these fires, and we're close to getting to full containment, I believe, in the coming weeks with respect to both fires. Not out of the woods yet, but making really significant progress. But Congress has to step forward. The Forest Service at the federal level has to step forward with, I think, significant investments as far as wildfire prevention and mitigation is concerned. We know that forest health, forest management is a critical component of protecting our communities here in northern Colorado. And when we think about what Estes Park and Red Feather and so many other communities, Glen Haven here in our state, Granby and Grand Lake have gone through over the course of the last 3 months, we've got to make sure we take every measure to ensure that they don't have to go through that again in the future. And so we actually are planning a big summit later this year. To the extent anybody's involved, would like to participate, they can reach out to Kim Red, who's in my office as our transportation lead, but also does a number of important constituent work as well. But we are planning a wildfire summit with a variety of different stakeholders, including residents, Forest Service officials, local fire personnel, law enforcement, and so forth, so that we can really get a better sense from folks on the ground about what their priorities are as far as prevention funds are concerned at the federal level. And again, happy to provide more detail in terms of our plans in that regard. So I will just close and then happy to take any questions by saying our door is always open, and over the course of the next 2 years, to the extent that anyone has any questions, ideas, suggestions, complaints, whatever the case may be, I hope you'll reach out to us. We're certainly always willing to listen. And we like to make sure that we're responsive to your priorities and your needs, and we'll certainly continue that tradition in the next Congress.
Congressman, we'll take advantage of that open door. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions today. I had 3 questions. You answered 2 of them, so I got a 67%. So we're going to have to let you go. We're trying to get the governor in somewhere around 12 o'clock, and we have a healthcare program that'll last about 20 minutes. So thank you for joining us. We most appreciate it. Again, congratulations on your re-election, and I hope to meet you personally sometime soon.
Thank you. Thank you all. Take care.